Hi there, and welcome to SimplyScale, a new mini-series from simplyvat.com to help 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers expand their business internationally with minimum stress. I'm Alex Wyatt, and this episode is Big Problems, Big Solutions, Strategies to Handle Amazon Selling Challenges with information shared by Michael Veazey of the Amazing FBA podcast and 10K Collective Mastermind. So today we're talking about all of these big problems that e-commerce sellers are facing. So let's define these problems. Why is it so tough right now at the moment for e-commerce sellers?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me, Alex. Great to be on this. Very exciting to be on a new podcast series. So, yeah, less exciting is all the rubbish that everyone's going through right now. If you don't have to talk very long to any serious Amazon or e-commerce seller to know that there's a lot going on. So I would define it as three things. All of them feed into each other. The first thing is stock, and specifically freight. I mean, yes, manufacturing costs are going up in China in waves. Sometimes raw material shortage is serious, but international freight, as you know, in Simply VAT, you guys deal with this stuff all the time. It's just blown up 5 to 10 times what it was year on year costs, which is crazy. The second thing added to that is fulfillment challenges. If you sell via Amazon FBA system, obviously the inventory performance index, can't even say it without stumbling because it's so horrendous. And all the inbound stock restrictions make life very, very tricky. And then the third thing, as a consequence of those two things, is lower profits, higher costs of stock, higher fulfillment costs if you're using 3PLs, and Amazon PPC costs, just to add to the party, have gone up about 30-40% year on year because Amazon knows that it can make a lot of profit from that. And so it does. So there's a lot of sort of nasty things going on. And so I'm going to try and deal with that in 25 minutes. That's my challenge I've set myself today.
Wow, so it does sound like quite a challenging landscape at the moment. Can you tell us a bit of a background about yourself and how you got into the e-commerce space and what you've been doing in it?
Sure. So my background's music, and I guess there's no coincidence, really. I'm going to give you a bit about the music background because I think it shows up in what I'm doing these days. My background's playing in orchestras, so it's all about groups. And I studied music and conducting in Germany and also in UK, and Germany is a big part of my interest as well. So when it came through to the Amazon world, I quite quickly moved on from just selling to starting to broadcast because I love discussing things. Hence, this is wonderful to get a chance to be a guest on somebody else's show. And also started running groups quite early, first of all, for myself, because I just felt isolated as a solopreneur and online. It's a double whammy. And then later on, I started running for other people as I realized just how powerful the right peer group can be. The wrong peer group, by the way, is not that powerful, but that's really, I guess, when I think about it, that sort of leading a group and making it the best group dynamic so that the individuals benefit from it is, I guess, not that far from the conducting that I used to do years ago as well.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's quite interesting when you get a load of people together and, you have so many more input and value coming from so many different angles and different experiences. So I can definitely see why that would be really useful. So what are some of the solutions to these problems? So the first problem you kind of mentioned was about stock movement, and this is, stock management, and this it seems to be a big problem with our clients at the moment. One, because of Brexit, there were so many issues there, and then
Yeah.
now leading into Q4, it always seems to be a busy period. So how do sellers manage this proactively and productively?
Yeah, it is a huge thing. And you mentioned Brexit. I'll come on to that in a minute because I think that's part of the one of the many challenges we've got on our plate here. I mean, really, the first thing is to get your house in order internally to your business. That is not the complete solution. But if you don't have a tight internal system and way of running things and understanding things in your business, it's really going to be hard. It's a bit like a captain on a ship. If your ship's not working mechanically, or if the crew is badly trained and you're going into a storm, which we really are collectively right now, it's really not a good situation at all. So the first thing is get your house in order. So I would say stock management, you really need to get your stock prediction as accurate as possible. And that is really, really hard to do, and price for stock management as well. People don't use price enough, I think, as a way to manage stock. They get obsessed, especially that Amazon platform, but not only. with ranking or how you're doing relative to your competition. But if everybody is selling at a loss, then sooner or later that's not sustainable or desirable. There's no point in having a strong market position or market share, if you will, in the normal world outside Amazon, or ranking if you want to be Amazon centric about it, if it's not valuable. And valuable translates to profit, not revenue. So I think sometimes the best thing you can do is to look at the stock you going, give a realistic stock projection based on worst case scenario and go, we are going to run out of stock if we keep selling at this rate, and you put your price up, which means you get more profits, and then you also are going to manage your stock as well. And I've seen that with anyone from the smaller clients to really big ones, that actually you can sometimes end up doubling your prices, but you're not primarily trying to increase your price, you're trying to manage your stock. A nice side effect is that you get more profit. So really you can only do that if you've got some kind of decent system. Do not rely on Amazon's basic predictions or just the last 30 or 60 days. I mean, if you're a serious seller and you've got a few 100,000 a year going through your business, I think you need to be more serious than that. I would say repricing tools, there are quite a few out there for online arbitrage or retail arb or wholesale sellers. If you're a private label seller, that's a little bit more cutting edge. And I do recommend checking out eva.guru, which is a very sophisticated artificial intelligence platform. I'm in quite close contact with them at the moment to try and gear some solutions, sort of make them tailored to the needs of some of our group members in the mastermind as a sort of crash test dummy scenario before it gets broader. So those guys are working very, very hard and they're quite sophisticated. But whatever solution you find, you need to get a sophisticated stock prediction system, and don't forget to use price as the other side of the equation. So just predicting what will happen, create what will happen. If you put your price up, generally your stock moves slower. And that means you can try and manage those periods where you would otherwise have a stock out.
So it sounds like you have a lot more control over what's happening
Yeah,
with your sales, essentially.
exactly right. I mean, people do a lot of trying to predict the future, which is incredibly hard. But if you kind of create the future to a degree, if there is demand pressure, if you will, on a product that's selling, say on Amazon because it's a simpler scenario, but it's the same if you're selling on Shopify or any other, WooCommerce, whatever. Same in physical retail stores, but that's not really my expertise. So let's say you're selling a product for $19.99 and it sells 30 units a day, and you have 3,000 units in stock. Whether you're fine, but you say you have 900 units in stock, and actually when you talk to your factory and your freight forwarder, you think it's going to take you 5 months to restock, and that sounds like a horror story, but that's quite likely. Okay, well, if you keep selling at that sort of velocity, you're going to run out of stock. Now that's a simplistic scenario, because we all know going to Q4 the demand goes off the hook, and in January it falls off the cliff. If you have a seasonal product, you may not. So you need to blend all the data you can, get a realistic stock projection, and then if you raise your price to, say, I don't know, $24.99 or whatever it is, and again you need some software to help you with it if you can, you can then slow the velocity down such that you don't go out of stock, because then your profits go from whatever they are to absolutely zero, guaranteed. And secondly, you should make more profit per unit as well. So that's something that's, I believe, underutilized, because everyone obsesses about ranking. And actually, I think we should be obsessed with profit and cash flow, particularly in tough times. Cash flow is everything in tough times, I would say.
Absolutely. So, I guess going on to your next kind of solution, how do you look at, replenishment projections and pricing and profit analytics? And how do you tie them all together, to help your business plan and prepare for these?
Well, it's very difficult to do, but I think it's really important to do the best you can, because they're dynamically interactive. So, for example, if your stock projection is that based on the current sales, let's say you were simplistic and you took the last 90 days of sales and you project it to the next 90, and you say that you're going to restock in 3 months and the price is X. Well, you can probably project that reasonably quickly and easily. I mean, assuming that you're not in Q4, which obviously at the time of recording in September, we are coming into Q4. So even that wouldn't work, right? But the truth is, you need to have a scenario planning where, okay, if I raise the price, what is that likely based on lots of data, preferably, internal data, and if you can get comparables from your industry or your category, very specific. For example, if I'm selling an iPhone stand, it's not going to behave the same as an iPhone case, and wouldn't behave the same as an iPhone. So you need to get quite granular, really, in the data you draw on, and then you need to have some kind of way of balancing out what happens if you raise the price and that slows down the stock, and then that changes your profit and loss. So dynamic pricing is really important. Reprices, as I said, it's kind of the same point, except what I'm trying to say with this solution is not just manage your stock and project it accurately, but integrate stock projections, pricing, and your analytics of profits, and try and price for maximum profit. And that normally means not going out of stock. The truth is, this is a really hard nut to crack. It's super hard. I therefore think it's the thing we should be obsessing with, because if you get that cracked and your competition doesn't, they go out of business and you stay in business, you win big time. But also, hello, if you go out of business, it's all over anyway. So scaling is great, but one of the things we have to do before we can scale is just still be in business next year. And I just think people overlook that sometimes. We've been in such calm, lovely, sunny waters for such a long time in e-commerce, since I've been in it since 2014, and arguably globally, apart from 2008, 9, 10, there was a bit of a blip. Ever since China's really come on stream as a manufacturing nation, we've had pretty much 2 decades of growth, and suddenly we're having to deal with the fact that there could be storms. So I think you got to work on that trade skill of integrating those things. That's really hard to do. Again, I hate to say it again, but Eva.guru is the only place that I've seen that I think there may be others. If I come across them, I'm happy to get in touch with you guys and add it to the show notes. But they seem to me the only people who are really seriously integrating those aspects. But whoever it is, maybe you need to get a custom solution built for your company. I just think you have to grow up and just make that a dynamic system that takes account of the fact that if you put the price up, your stock will move at a different speed. And then is that optimized for profit or not? All I can say is if you optimize your pricing, you can really, really increase your profit, like 10, 20, 30%. It's very, very hard work, but it's really worth it.
Wow. So it does sound like it's like a mini strategy just for your product pricing and stock that you're implementing
Yeah, they're
in
two sides
play.
of the same coin, aren't they? And people don't treat them like that, but they are. If you put your price up, your stock velocity slows down. Everyone knows that from common sense and experience. The conversion rate's going to be affected by price, main image, to some extent the title on Amazon, or the product detail page on Shopify, and the reviews in particular on Amazon, right?
Mhm.
So, but how do we then integrate that into our planning and cash flow planning? That's the key. And I'm not giving like instant solutions here. I guess the most instant solution I can give is a tool. But to try and do it manually, I can't tell you how to do that in 10 minutes.
It's a whole nother episode for you.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
Um, Moving on to kind of another question that we get asked a lot from our clients is what happens if the Amazon fulfillment center is full, or there's a lot of inbound stock limits where they're quite strict. We've seen that a lot recently with Brexit and everything kind of now being split. Amazon is limiting people's inbound shipments. So what happens? What do you do? What's the workaround?
Well, honestly, I mean, the workaround is the painful thing of finding a third party, a 3PL, so a third party logistics company, and get good at handling it. Because honestly, it's hard, it's essential. Nobody wants to deal with it. They try and think of it as a temporary blip. But if you think about the massive growth in e-commerce during the COVID period, and the fact that Amazon and other fulfillment networks for e-commerce have not really built much infrastructure, it's obvious that it's going to get kind of full. Also, when it comes to Amazon, which is by far the biggest single kind of fulfillment, possibility, and you can, of course, if you choose to link Shopify or other things to Amazon FBA as a separate system. The trouble is this: Amazon loses money because it's built such an amazing set of promises to the consumer. They're customer obsessed, right? Customer, they genuinely are, I think. And the way they're going to win market share and keep growing their market share, or at least keep the same market share whilst e-commerce blows up, is simple, that they promise incredible things and deliver on it, but that's very, very expensive. Same day delivery in the USA, which is mostly available in most places, that's across a continent. That's 3,000 miles away potentially, or something, or more. If you're delivering to Alaska from Pennsylvania, it's a disaster. So the trouble is that Amazon loses money every single time it sells anything itself as a first party seller, and it probably just about maybe breaks even with its fulfillment with the payment from third party sellers. So it's not really going to want to expand that network anymore when it comes to the economics of it. And I think it's done its kind of market share grabbing. I don't see Amazon really being very incentivized unless it really thinks Walmart is grabbing market share off it in a serious way. And Walmart's a tenth the size of Amazon in e-commerce, right? So for me, I don't think this is a blip. I think this is a longer term problem. It's going to be very extreme in Q4 this year. So I think we have to get used to it. We have to get a 3PL that can drip feed stock into FBA centers. If you haven't got one, go get one now before they all run out. If you don't have a 3PL that can do seller fulfilled prime or fulfilled by merchant, I think you need to build that in. Now, yes, it can endanger your Amazon account. If you're not an Amazon seller, forgive me focusing on this so much. And yeah, there are risks and you need to be very mindful about it. But I think you need to gear up for that. I just think assuming that FBA will in any way be available, let alone at a sensible stock level, is a very big single point of failure. And no business should have a single point of failure. The good news, the only good news in this, but it is really good news, is this. Bad news for consumers, massive inflation is working its way through the system. It's obvious because, freight prices gone up 10x, 1,000% year on year. That cannot just not get passed on. But the good news is that consumers are going to be one way or the other getting used to more inflated prices in consumer life in general for fast moving consumer goods and specifically on Amazon, in Google shopping, Shopify stores within that, etc. So I think we can probably pass on more of the extra overhead than we think. And how consumers react to higher pricing, do they keep spending or do they keep spending in Q4 and drawing their horns in January? That's a whole other topic. But I do think that you've got a bit more leeway than you would have thought historically. Again, we've been in a historical situation where prices tend to drop quickly. I think we're going to be seeing the opposite, which is for most of us, we've not been in that situation before. But that's a bit of, silver lining to the cloud, if you like.
Yeah, I think, you know what, there's a lot of great 3PLs coming up right now
Hmm.
that are really challenging Amazon. And I think you're completely right. When is Amazon going to hit their kind of limit? So yeah, I think it's quite an exciting space and definitely something that people should be using right away is a 3PL, no matter what,
Yeah.
platforms that you sell on.
I just want to add to that as well. People think of Amazon as one big lump, but that's a really big error. It's an amazing traffic platform, um, and it's an amazing sales platform, and it's an amazing fulfillment platform. But you don't have to do all of it. For example, I know one of the members of my mastermind 10K Collective. I'll call him out because he's doing great work. Ashley Pierce. He's building blogs for people that they're going to get traffic from Google SEO, which is always good value if you can get it to work. Just takes a long time and is fiddly and a different art. But then often sending that traffic to Amazon to actually get the sales. So Amazon's a sales channel. Now, FBA is a fulfillment channel, but you can sell on Amazon and not have it fulfilled by Amazon. You can sell on Amazon and not bring the traffic from Amazon. So I think breaking Amazon up mentally into the three parts, traffic, sales or conversions, if you like, and fulfillment is really important. So we don't have to be on Amazon or off Amazon, but we can use Amazon for its strengths, which is incredible conversion rates, and also when it's available, incredible fulfillment, very accurate, very customer happy making. But equally, we need to be willing to go and we can plug in our own fulfillment as a separate thing. So once we break it up mentally, that frees you up to look at it in a bit more of a logical way, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. Um, Okay, moving on. You kind of briefly mentioned about the rise in international freight costs, and that's also been a huge, massive issue, for businesses' overheads. Lots of people were coming into this space originally years ago, and now all of a sudden these costs are so high to get started. So, what's your thoughts on these inflated prices?
I think in a way it's the tip of the iceberg, and like the captain of the Titanic should have done, you need to look ahead and be diligent about looking at the, if you like, the rough seas around you. So I'm pushing my nautical metaphors a bit far. The other week I came across a really nice way of analyzing the international situation. It's a bit like a SWOT analysis, but for the global market. And now it sounds like the sort of thing normally a corporation would have time to pontificate and the rest of us will just be getting on with life. But I think this is so big now that we will have to do this. It's called a pest analysis. So I'll just share it with you. And I think two or three of these things really jump out as me as very relevant for e-commerce importers. First one is PEST, so PEST, political factors. So you mentioned Brexit. That is not a small little change, little bump that we can read the newspapers and then get on with our business. That's absolutely game changing. Sadly, in a very bad way. I've got so many mastermind members, very experienced, savvy people, hands-on operators who took months to get stock from the UK to the EU, had multiple goes at it. And, of course, they would, how do we deal with VAT? And I would always send them to Simply VAT. And again, having a mastermind where you can, get some recommendations of people who actually know how to handle it as opposed to say they do, there's a big difference there. So that's huge. The US relationship to China also is Biden's administration going to be different to the previous one with its regard to tariffs on China's goods? Very clearly not. And I think, again, that's a long-term trend. That wasn't a blip. That wasn't a one president idea. That's an ongoing thing. So you've got to think about that has a very massive impact on, could end up with 30, 40, 50% effective tax on the import. So you've got to think that one through. E is economic policies and factors. And there are two sides of that. The demand side, or the stimulus side, is the stimulus of various kinds, huge stimulus from UK government, US government. Germany has promised to effectively give some kind of equivalent to that money for the next 2 years. So that's going to have a big effect on consumer demand. And whilst nobody can see the future, you've got to get a sense of where that is. And then the downside is the massive knock-on effect of COVID on the world supply chains. So these are the problems, by the way. We'll talk solutions in a second. So if you're getting depressed, I will try and heal your pain. The third one, S of PEST, is social factors. So sustainability, for example, has gone from nice to have to must have for millennial consumers. By the way, everyone says millennial like they're like this young generation that one day will be in charge of the world. But you're a millennial. My wife's a millennial. It includes people in their late 30s. It's mainstream. So what used to be an edge thing is now mainstream. That's just one example. And then T is technology. How is technology being used by your competition, and how could you leverage it before they do, is my question. So those are the global problems that I see, and that PEST is quite a good framework to do a sort of, if you like, global SWOT analysis.
Absolutely. And so when you use the PEST, what kind of solutions are there to these global challenges that we're facing that you kind of mentioned throughout your analysis there?
Well, the bad news is these aren't going to be quick fixes because these are big problems and you need big solutions. As I said to you, I mean, sometimes the big solutions have to come from you. I can't give you a quick hack, but the obvious things are, if you're importing to the USA, consider importing from somewhere else. China can't be easily overnight replicated, and nobody's pretending they can. I mean, and people like Apple have been working on that. But there are places like Vietnam that you can consider. But also, if you're thinking about freight problems, then you can kill two birds with one stone by looking at Mexico. And if you're looking at politics, again, the mood music from Washington, again, even from the previous regime, where you could say the president wasn't necessarily known for his friendliness to all other nations, and I'm not going to get into politics, but again, that's consistent with this administration. NAFTA 2 or whatever, this North American Free Trade Association, it's called something different now, I forget, but Canada, US, Mexico are kind of buddies again, and Mexico is the obvious place to source. And if I were US based or selling in the US, I'd definitely consider that. And another example is, instead of importing to the UK from China and then trying to export it out to Germany, it turns out it's actually quicker, frightening but true, at the time of recording, as I understand it, to import directly from China to Germany if you're a UK-based Amazon business. So again, trying to bypass the obvious political kind of walls that have gone up. When it comes to economics, I think on the demand side, that's hard to gauge consumer demand and how people will behave when they have less money in their pockets. But there was a very, very unsubtle 2 or 3 weeks in 2020 where everyone was scared, sales fell off a cliff, and then the US government poured money into consumers' pockets, and then sales jumped up. So I've seen that correlation very clearly. Now, we may be seeing the opposite side. So I would keep a close eye on, what stimulus money is the US government, the UK government's furlough scheme, etc. And then the knock-on effects of COVID on the world supply chains. Once again, go regional. If you're in the UK, for example, you might want to consider sourcing in Europe. Now, that does come with political baggage, so there is no easy solution if you're UK-based. But you could always source in the UK. I mean, literally had a client who came to me and said, I want to talk to you because you're good at importing from China. I said, yeah, I can do that. But here's what I would say. Don't. You live in South Wales in UK, and he wanted to create some products made of steel, and there's great steel production tradition there. And so I said, try and source as locally as you possibly can. And bless him, he went out the very next week. He'd had a conversation with a factory like 10 miles, 15 kilometers down the road from him. So that's the way to go, because that simplifies so much stuff, and it means your cash isn't tied up for so long. It doesn't matter what happens to international freight because you're not subject to it. It doesn't matter what happens to international borders because you're not subject to that. So really, sourcing in the same country is a brilliant solution to a lot of these problems. Final two things: the social side. I mean, I would say maybe I'm not as woke as some people out there, so I'm not the best person to advise. But social factors, sustainability, environmental sustainability is obviously huge. Go green with everything. When you source packaging, make sure it's green as a default. When you're sourcing materials, make sure they're recyclable as a default, and so forth. And then tech, leverage tech before your competition. For example, if you're trying to work out dynamic pricing for private label and that's fairly cutting edge, get into it now. Get to grips with it. Try systems out, reject the ones that don't work. Use spreadsheets if you need to, but get to grips with it, because if you don't, the competition will. So you're either going to be ahead of that curve or behind it, but you can't just be neutral.
Wow. That's a lot of great information to take away.
Sorry, yeah, just
And
chucking stuff at you here.
no, but I think that's really, really useful, and some great kind of tips and solutions in there for anyone listening. So kind of to I guess the final solution we're looking for is, how can sellers get tactical, actionable information about all of this stuff, to dive into the detail, because you've given great overviews about what people can do at surface level, but then how do they take this to the next level, to deep dive essentially?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm very guilty in a way, or I'm quite consciously giving very, very broad solutions, because partly I feel like people try and reach for tactics, and you should set your strategy first and then find the tactics to implement it. Because if you're trying to hack your way around freight costs increasing 1,000% for China, then I'm sorry to say that there ain't a hack around that, and it's not a blip. I think it's a big bulge at the best. In my personal opinion, I've spoken to a lot of freight forwarders about this, and nobody's willing to make an actual statement of how long they think it's going to last. But there are people who've been in the business 30 years who've never seen anything like it. That doesn't sound good. Once in a generation, bad things. So yeah, you are going to have to think big. But yeah, when it comes to the tactics, couple of things. Obviously, listening to a good podcast like SimplyScale, you are geared to solutions for that kind of person that's in that situation. But in the end, I would say my experience as a seller and now as a convener of masterminds is honestly a really great peer group, whatever that is, whether it's called a mastermind or something else. I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, united we stand, divided we fall. I mean, there is something stronger about a group than a bunch of individual businesses. And even if you have, if you're a solopreneur, it can be really hard to keep your motivation up, because it's very doubly isolating. It's just you, or you and your business partner, or you and your wife, or, and that can be problematic. Arguments with business partners, and even if you've got a big team, you're the CEO or COO or the owner, you can't just chat about the problems with the cash flow with the scheme. You'll just scare everyone. So you need somewhere you can really be yourself and honest in a safe space. And that's what I've really tried to create in the mastermind. And I'm really happy about the way it's turned out, way better than I expected, actually. And we've been doing it for 4 years now, just coming up to our sort of 4-year anniversary of the mastermind, as it were, for serious sellers. And I've run masterminds for sort of beginners. I've run masterminds that were free, and in neither situation did it really kind of work. You need somebody who's going to head up the mastermind. In my experience, I mean, I'm not making rules for anyone. Somebody has to book venues for hotels if you're going to meet in person, decide when the Zoom calls are, chase people up, send them a little PM, decide who gets in, interview people. There's quite a lot of work. So it's a bit like running a sort of, club. This is the modern online equivalent of the old London gentlemen's clubs, where a lot of business got done and probably still does. So honestly, what I find in that is that if you want to know the specific answer to a specific question, 2 amazing things come out of that situation. One is, try Simply VAT. I spoke to them last week. Talk to Alex. She'll sort you out, that kind of thing. So very specific recommendations. And also, yes, we tried A, B, and C people about VAT. Don't bother. They don't know what they're doing. That kind of thing, right? And they've actually tried it. They're not trying to sell it to you. They're not a podcaster. They're just somebody else in the trenches. That's really valuable. The second thing is simply like watching other people, learning from other people's experiments. So some people have tried exporting to Europe from the UK without I think it's a direct representative. You'll know all about that kind of stuff. And it went completely horribly wrong. So the other 9 people in the group who were looking at, along at that, or 12, what it was at the time, didn't have to repeat that experiment because it went horribly wrong. And so you can effectively run multiple experiments across multiple categories and types of business at the same time, and you don't have to run most of them. You get to learn the results, and so you can kind of build on each other's work. So it works really well if you've got the right people and if you've got the right sort of dynamic. And I can't say enough about masterminds. I mean, I'm biased because I run one, but form your own, find somebody else, doesn't matter. But I'm a huge believer in it because it really works. It's not an instant fix, but over time you can really feel a sort of group momentum building if you get the right people.
I completely agree. I think a community really helps. And like you said, learning from other people's failures and not having to go through it yourself, which is
Yeah.
such a
Other
breath of
people's
fresh air.
money, other people's experience. Like, why bother
Exactly.
doing it? Yeah, but so many people do recreate the wheel. And especially with things like the Brexit situation, it's just a disaster. I mean, it's really, really hard. And it's the sort of thing with Brexit, you have to determine experimentally to agree, because as far as I can tell, and I'm not an expert in this, God knows, that the UK and the EU don't really have many concrete kind of systems and processes in place, as far as I can tell. And if they do, they're not implemented very consistently. So really, you have to determine by experiment. And then it's really helpful to meet once a month, once every 2 weeks, once a week, whatever the rhythm is, and compare notes. And you can move forward so much faster. Whereas if you did it in isolation, you'd have to spend all year experimenting just to get that one shipment through. Maybe one lone pallet goes from UK to Germany. Instead of which, you can probably do that in a quarter or even less of the time. If somebody else has done it, you can try wave 5 because they've tried 1, 2, 3, 4 and they didn't work.
I love it. I love it. Um, okay, so we've talked a lot about, all of your solutions, which I think is great. So can you please give us 5 takeaways for dealing with these problems? Just summarize all of your solutions that you've given to us today, and so people can start actioning and take some of these things away.
Yeah, as I say, I apologize for giving very broad advice today, but I think that the detail is going to have to come from, talking to the right service providers, and as I say, talking to the right other sellers. So here are my rather broad solutions. Number one, stock management, generally, huge problem. Stock prediction accurately and pricing dynamically, I think, are really, really important. Don't rely on Amazon's basic predictions, and don't be lazy about it. Just really dive into it. It's going to be some pain. There'll be some spreadsheets involved, possibly. You'll probably try 2 or 3 software solutions and you won't like the first 2. Okay, then if it's going to be like that, I'd get going with it as soon as you can, so you can get to the point where it works, and that will be a beautiful thing. The second thing, very closely linked to that, which isn't quite just the same thing, is integrate, try and create a system that is dynamically integrating stock replenishment projections, pricing, and profit analytics, because you cannot separate from each other, really. If you do, you'll end up making weird decisions, like you'll restock beautifully, but you'll run out of cash, or you'll have lots of cash available, but no stock. And that's a sign that you're not integrating things. And everyone goes through that. You're always going to be either overstocked or out of stock, but you can get a lot more precise than you think if you really put your mind to it. Number 3 takeaway is FBA's full, work around it. Be real about that. Get your 3PLs up, meaning both people who can receive stock from wherever it's made and drip feed it into the FBA centers. And I would also strongly advise that can also fulfill for you. Just be very cautious. Just be very, very specific about their abilities to do that without damaging your Amazon account with terrible metrics. We all know that. But you're going to have to deal with it. So grasp that nettle now, right? Solution 4, read the writing on the wall. Think regional or national sourcing. If you're in the US, sourcing Mexico, maybe even Canada, probably going to be over expensive for most things. But certainly the US is full of great manufacturers, and the UK has fewer, but actually still very good quality manufacturers for national sourcing. And you bypass, the beautiful thing is, the best solution, the best part, as Elon Musk says, is no part. So just cut out international freight if it's a problem, cut out border controls and import and export and VAT registration in other countries. And then you simplify your business model, and you, by the way, as a nice side bonus, which is actually huge, your cash conversion cycle is much better because you're not ordering products that you're going to tie up your money for 6 months from China. But that's another story. So huge benefits to regional and national sourcing. It's not easy. Get your hands dirty. Now's the time to get ahead of the trend, because I swear by everything that's holy that everybody will be doing this in a few months, because it will be blindingly obvious. So see the writing on the wall. Move now is my strong advice. And then finally, 5 is don't suffer alone. Get a real peer group. People who are your peers, not people who once sold something on Amazon and asking dumb newbie questions, but equally not somebody who's running a corporate enterprise that's 100 times bigger than you. You need people within, an order of magnitude of your sort of revenue, I would suggest. So if you're doing 50 grand a month, somebody with 500 grand a month can help you. Somebody doing 5, 10, 20 million has different issues. So find the right peer group, join it, be a great contributor, and you get out what you put in.
Perfect. And speaking of peer groups, what ways can you help, and how can people join in your mastermind?
Sure. So if you're doing over 40 or 50,000, so 40,000 pounds or 50,000 euros or dollars equivalent on Amazon private label, we do have people that have quite substantial Shopify presences, but their main focus is on Amazon still. Then you could join the 10K Collective, and it's, join us in our going into our 4th year, www.theamazonmastermind.com. I'm sure Amazon will come after me for that gross piece of IP infringement, but for the moment, theamazonmastermind.com works, or you can check it out, amazingfba.com, under our paid programs. And then if you're doing just 10 to 40 or $50,000 a month sort of range, or euros, I'm starting a brand new group for people sort of low to mid-figure a year sellers, supplemented by some one-to-one work as well. So just email me, because I haven't got a sales page up because it's that new, michael@amazingfba.com. That's MICHAEL at amazing, F for Freddy, B for Bertie, A for Alpha.com. And I'd be delighted to have a chat and see if we can help.
Thank you so much. Well, that's it for episode 1 of Simply Scale. Be sure to stay tuned and check out other episodes to help grow your online business. Follow us on social media using the tag @SimplyVat for more tips, tricks, and inside info, all on e-commerce. See you all in episode 2. Bye.